You're in charge of taking care of Mom. My husband says, as if it were a given. His face shows not a hint of doubt that I might refuse. Probably thinking that since I took care of and saw his father through to the end, it's only natural I'd do the same for his mother. Let's get a divorce. Here you are. I suddenly bring up divorce, and my husband looks as if he's been shot. Then, he goes pale as he looks at the photo I'm handing him. The woman and the roughly 2-year-old child in the photo are unmistakably his mistress and their loved child. My name is Lisa. I'm a 46-year-old housewife. I live with my husband Dan, who is 3 years my senior, and my mother-in-law. Until 2 years ago, our family also included my son and my father-in-law, making us a family of 5. With the family size reduced, the house has probably become much quieter. My son, Bob, is currently 18 years old and a freshman in college. He left home this year to live in a college dormitory. My father-in-law fell ill about 5 years ago, became immobilized, and despite our desperate care, passed away 2 years ago. He was a serious, kind, and gentle man. I had always been helped by such a father-in-law since I was young. That's why I devotedly took care of him until the end, intending it as a form of repayment. He always thanked me for being there, holding my hand and saying at the end, "I was truly happy to have you as my son's wife, thank you." It might have been a nice story if it ended there. But after my father-in-law died, my mother-in-law started blaming me, saying, "It's your fault he died. It's because you weren't good enough that you let him die. You murderer. You must be relieved that caregiving is over. Inhuman. You crappy wife. Give him back." Even though she had practically dumped all of my father-in-law's care on me, using her age as an excuse. Furthermore, my mother-in-law made me do all sorts of chores. No matter what I was doing, she would ask me to do trivial tasks, and if I was even slightly late, she'd scold me, saying, "You sluggish wife. Do you expect me to do it myself? Do you want to die young like him?" and kept being nasty and sarcastic. I had felt that she never really liked me much, but the bullying started all of a sudden. If my father-in-law were alive, he would have definitely stopped her. But he's no longer in this world. It became clear that my mother-in-law's true nature was that of a bullying mother-in-law after my father-in-law passed away. When I talked to my husband about it, all he said was, "Mom's having a hard time since Dad passed away. Just bear with it a bit and let her take it out on you." I had realized 3 years ago that my husband was having an affair and that he had a mistress. He suddenly started coming home late and spending nights out more frequently. He only said it was work when I asked, but I, having been with him for many years, could tell he was lying. My husband is terrible at keeping secrets, and his eyes wander when he lies. When I secretly checked his smartphone behind his back, it was as if I had hit the jackpot with evidence of his affair, and his mistress's personal information was all leaked. Moreover, I found out that his mistress was pregnant with his child. At that moment, I lost all love for my husband. While my father-in-law was suffering from illness and I was taking care of him, my husband was betraying our family all along. I wanted to get divorced right away. But I was worried about my father-in-law and couldn't bring myself to do it. Even after my father-in-law passed away, I couldn't divorce because I was worried about my son. My son was attending a private high school and was studying hard, aiming for a prestigious university. For my son's tuition and to ensure he could concentrate on his studies without distractions, I silently endured my husband's affair and my mother-in-law's bullying. I couldn't cause a divorce scandal now. My mother-in-law took advantage of my son being engrossed in his studies to skillfully bully me without him noticing. There was another reason I didn't want my son to find out. He had been very fond of my mother-in-law since he was little, and he dearly called her grandma, so I didn't want to sadden him. Taking advantage of my silence, my mother-in-law's bullying escalated even further. My husband's attempts to hide his affair also became clumsier. My mother-in-law kept saying, "Living off your son's money as a stay-at-home mom." She probably thought I couldn't leave because I was just a stay-at-home mom. The reason I became a stay-at-home mom was to take care of my father-in-law. Before that, I had been part-time. Even back then, my mother-in-law used to imply, even though it's just part-time, a woman working? A woman's place is in the home. After my father-in-law passed away, she'd say, someone as useless as you could never work. You'd just cause trouble for everyone. Acting as if you're glad dad's gone and going off to work. Bob's taking his exams, and you're okay with him failing because his mother isn't around? The only job that was somehow tolerated for me was freelancing using my computer. It was more like it was overlooked rather than allowed. Playing around on the computer again, how leisurely, she'd sneer repeatedly, but my technologically inept husband and mother-in-law thought I was just playing on the computer. They never dreamed I was actually earning an income from it. Thanks to that, I was able to work openly. One of the freelancing jobs I did was creating scenarios for satisfying revenge videos on YouTube. Drawing from real-life experiences, namely my husband and mother-in-law, I'd depict wicked in-laws and unfaithful husbands and satisfyingly beat them down. Since they were based on real experiences, my scenarios were praised for their realism. It was gratifying to see my videos get tens of thousands of views and comments like that. Felt good. Take that, husband and mother-in-law. But it also felt empty. I wished I could deal with a cheating husband and a bullying mother-in-law in real life as I did in my creations, instead of enduring miserably without talking back or fighting back in reality. Engaging in this sort of escapism only made me feel more miserable. I thought maybe other women who enjoyed these videos were also enduring terrible husbands and mothers-in-law, looking for a way to vent their frustrations. The thought that there might be others out there like me was somewhat comforting. Though I couldn't do anything at the moment, I meticulously recorded everything about my husband's affair as evidence for when the time comes. It seems a love child was born. The child's name appears to be Yosef. It seems the child has started calling my husband Daddy. Apparently, the three of them went on a picnic together, among other things. Everything was laughably out in the open. On the day of the university entrance exam results, Bob, thanks to his hard work, was accepted into his first-choice prestigious university. My mother-in-law and I celebrated his success as if it were our own. Meanwhile, my husband, even at a time like this, only sent a congratulatory message via text and went off to be with his mistress and their love child. It seemed he didn't care about Bob's success at all. Was Yosef, his other, younger child, really that important to him over Bob, who's nearly an adult? As for Bob, he seemed not to care much. Saying in a cool tone, "It can't be helped, it's work." My husband claimed he had unavoidable work, but I knew he was lying. In front of Bob, my mother-in-law didn't engage in any bullying and acted like the perfect grandmother. I, too, played along as if we were a happy family. Bob left home to live in a dorm at his university. He seems to be enjoying his college life with his friends, and he contacts us from time to time. While I'm deeply moved and a little sad to see how much my son has grown, I'm also relieved that my child-rearing days are somewhat over, even though the frequency of bullying by my mother-in-law may increase. Around the same time, my mother-in-law's behavior started to become strange. Her forgetfulness suddenly worsened, and she began forgetting how to use household appliances she had been able to use before, asking me to do it for her more and more. She would suddenly become irritable and yell at me, misplace valuable items like her wallet, and accuse me of stealing them, saying, "You stole it, didn't you? You thief! Give me back my wallet." She wouldn't listen even when I denied it. At first, I thought this was just another form of bullying since she had always made me do things for her and taken her frustrations out on me. Especially now that Bob had left home. But the situation seemed odd, even for her. And these changes matched the early symptoms of dementia. Even then, my husband, preoccupied with his affair, didn't notice the changes in his mother and remained indifferent to what was happening at home. I consulted my husband, who had just returned from an affair, about the possibility of his mother having dementia. As I spoke, his expression changed. It seemed that even he couldn't remain indifferent to the possibility of his mother having dementia. We decided to take my mother-in-law to the hospital together. My mother-in-law was resisting, saying, "How rude. There's nothing wrong with me. Don't treat me like I'm sick." You stupid wife. But, saying we were just going for a walk, we somehow managed to get her out together. It was the first joint effort between my husband and me in a long while. As expected, she was diagnosed with dementia at the hospital. When we returned home from the hospital, my mother-in-law fell asleep immediately due to exhaustion. So, Lisa, I'm counting on you to take care of Mom, my husband said, without a moment's hesitation or a trace of apology, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He looked utterly unconcerned about the possibility of me refusing. He probably even thought, now that the kid is independent, it's good you have a role, being a bored stay-at-home mom. I took care of his father so devotedly, I would naturally take care of his mother as well. He doesn't care about the difference between his kind father and his bullying mother at all. I thought to myself, this is the only chance I'll get to divorce him. What's the matter? You're going to take care of her, right? My husband looked puzzled as I didn't nod in agreement. You wouldn't say no, right? You looked after my dad, and Bob has moved out. You're just a stay-at-home mom playing on the computer all day, aren't you? My suspicions were confirmed. He still seems to think I'm just playing on the computer. Does he not know how much his mother has been making me do during the day? I didn't respond to his remarks and instead took out a photo. Let's get a divorce. This. My husband, suddenly confronted with divorce, looked as if he had been shot. Then, looking at the photo I handed him, he paled instantly. The woman and the toddler in the photo were undoubtedly his mistress and their love child. The photo was from a celebration, marking the growth of children, featuring the three of them. Why do you? What is this? There's more, look. I said, scattering several photos across the table. Photos of his mistress during her pregnancy. Photos of the newborn love child. The woman, was her name May? She's pretty. The love child's name was Yosef, right? Cute but at that demanding age. Bob was this small once too. I commented as I picked up each photo, while my husband's mouth opened and closed in shock. How long have you known? About 3 years, I think. I've been keeping a record of you too. I've endured it all, pretending not to know. For your father's sake, and for Bob's. But now that your father is gone and Bob has left home, please, let's get divorced. I said, placing the divorce papers, already filled out with my name, on the table. My husband, in disbelief, stared at them for a moment before starting to argue. But, my mom is still here, so? So? You took care of my dad, and now you want to abandon my mom? Sorry, but your father and your mother are different from me. How are they different? They're both my parents. Your father was always kind and grateful for my care. In contrast, your mother has always been harsh, making me do everything and berating me. Since she developed dementia, it's only gotten worse. How can you think they're the same? That's because my mom's been having a hard time since my dad passed. It's understandable that she'd want to take it out on someone, right? Try to be more understanding. I'm tired of hearing you say that. So is it okay to do anything because she's having a hard time? Is it okay to bully her daughter-in-law? Well, but you could be a little more forgiving. I've been more than forgiving. I've endured everything. I've always complied with what your mother wanted, took care of her. What have you been doing all this time? You never once helped me, never once stood up to your mother, leaving all the troublesome matters to me while you went on having affairs and even had a love child. You were planning to continue living like this, weren't you? Me, taking care of your mother with dementia by myself, getting treated even worse than before without a word of thanks, while you keep having affairs as usual, and your love child grows up healthy. I can't take it anymore, I've reached my limit. That's why I'm getting a divorce. Maybe I was wrong, but... My husband stammered, his face turning red. Then, suddenly, he became defensive. But don't make it sound like you're the only one who's had it tough. You're a stay-at-home mom, you have no idea about the struggles of me. Excuse me? I've had a hard time too, living a double life with you and my mistress and her child. What's that, playing the victim? Shut up. After all, you're just a stay-at-home mom. You can't possibly understand my struggles. You've been living off my money, and without me, you wouldn't survive. Your parents are long gone, you have nowhere to go, right? Do you understand that? Bob's still in college, he still needs money. At first, my husband was defensive, but as he argued, he gradually returned to his dismissive attitude. He must think threatening divorce is just a bluff, that I couldn't possibly go through with it. Don't worry about it, I said, showing him the balance of my personal bank account on my smartphone. There was about $60,000 saved up. My husband's savings were around $20,000, if I remember correctly. He hasn't been able to save much because he's been supporting his mistress and love child. Seeing the amount nearly 3 times his savings, my husband was speechless. Where did all this money come from? You weren't working at some nightclub behind my back, were you? I was dumbfounded. Are you kidding me? Do you really think I had time for that? No way. Before your father passed, he transferred some money into my personal account as a thank you for all the dedicated care I provided. It was about $20,000. That's a lie, right? My dad gave that kind of money to you instead of me or my mom. You and Mom left all the caregiving to me. Then, what about the rest of the $40,000? That's from my income. You were working at a nightclub or something, after all. Why would you jump to that conclusion? Then, what do you mean by income? I never saw you working to earn any money. That's not true. You should have seen me working all the time. What are you talking about? I don't know anything about that. The thing you and Mom called playing on the computer. What about it? You can't mean. I've saved up that much by working from home on my computer. Just by typing away on the computer, you've saved up this much. Are you kidding? My husband, who struggles to keep up with the times, found it even harder to believe. Now, I can live on my own and I have skills. I can even pay for Bob's tuition. Though I will be asking for child support from you. What? Please, don't. You know there's a little kid involved, right? Of course, I know. That's why I'm claiming it. It's tough, right? With the expenses and care for the child only increasing. Do your best not to let the child suffer. Wait. What about my mom if you leave? Without the money, there's no way to afford a nursing home or hire a caregiver. She'll definitely refuse to rely on her. She's already got her hands full with a needy child. You're the only one we can rely on. How can you abandon us like this? Are you heartless? Then, you should take care of her. She's your parent, isn't she? You've left her care to me all this time while you had your affair. You should try it. That's impossible. Unlike you, I have a job. I had a job too, as I just showed you. Don't compare your easy job, just tapping away at a computer, to mine. What's that supposed to mean? You don't even know what my job entails. There's no such thing as an easy job in this world. Plus, I've been handling all the household chores and looking after Bob's education. Don't say I had it easy. But I don't know how to care for someone. You knew how to care for my dad. You should know what to do. Please, don't leave. Suddenly, he started pleading with a trembling voice. But you said it was tough having a double life, right? Because of having 2 families, you couldn't freely visit your mistress and love child whenever you wanted. I smiled at my husband. Well, good for you. Now, you can consolidate into one family. You can be with those 2 openly. Yosef can recognize you officially as her father. I didn't mean for it to end like this. Divorce was never my intention. It was just a fling. But then she got pregnant and insisted on keeping the baby. I had no choice but to play the father role in that family too. And so... What an excuse. It's his fault for having an affair in the first place. But I'm done. I will truly break it off with her. I won't see her again. I'll do whatever I can to help with my mom. I won't dump everything on you anymore. I'll make up for everything. So, please, don't divorce me. I love you, Lisa, more than anyone." While tears in his eyes, he clung to me. I didn't feel sorry for him at all, I was just utterly disgusted. Was I really married to this pathetic man? Huh? Break up, not see her again? Then what about the child? She's still so small and needs so much care. And you're just going to abandon your responsibilities? How irresponsible and selfish can you get? Don't joke with me. Don't say that. You don't need to worry about the child, right? You're the most important to me. My husband pleaded, clinging to me. I coldly shrugged off his hands. I'm not fond of your mistress's child either. But what disappointed me more is how easily you would abandon your mistress and child when things got tough. The child is innocent. Take care of your mistress and that child from now on. Now, hurry up and sign the divorce papers. If you refuse, we'll go to mediation, and it won't be in your favor. I have plenty of evidence of your affair. After staring at the divorce papers for a while, my husband, resigned and sobbing, slowly began to sign his name. Once he finished, I immediately took the papers. I was going to file them at the office right away. Oh, and by the way, I reported to your company about how you've been frequently visiting your mistress's house under the guise of work. What does that have to do with anything? I reported it to your company. Hey! You're kidding, right? Why go that far? How much do you want to corner me? He exclaimed in desperation. Well, as a wife, I had to follow up on my husband's work, didn't I? Well, I'm not your wife anymore. Take care. Thank you for everything. I said, leaving the house we had lived in for many years, his cries of despair behind me. Of course, among my belongings was my valuable work tool, my computer. A few steps away from the house, I looked back at the home I had shared with my husband for so long. A home I would never return to again. There were happy memories in that house. Cherished and nostalgic memories. But perhaps there were more tough times than good. Whispering goodbye in my heart, I turned back around and started walking again. This time, I didn't look back. I felt incredibly liberated with every step. Later, through a lawyer, I demanded child support from my ex-husband. Presenting the evidence of the mistress and hidden child that I had collected over the years, even the lawyer was impressed. You've gathered quite a lot. Therefore, the claim was straightforward. The mistress was furious. I can't pay this much while raising a child. It's your fault your wife found out. You pay for everything, she snapped at my ex-husband. Naturally, struggling with payment and caring for his dementia-stricken mother, my ex-husband couldn't afford to pay for everything. Moreover, after it was discovered that he was visiting his mistress under the guise of work trips, he was demoted and his salary was cut. This was a severe blow for him at the time. He had asked the mistress to marry him in exchange for caring for his mother with dementia, but the mistress was outraged. Why should I care for that old hag? Hey, don't talk about my mother like that. Just put her in a facility. I don't care about some old lady with dementia. How can you say that about someone's parents? Besides, but I don't feel that way at all. I don't care about your parents. Don't dump her on me. I'm already overwhelmed taking care of this child. The mistress started working in a nightclub, which led to frequent arguments with my ex-husband. What do you mean? It's your fault I have to do this. I'm working and earning. Got a problem with that? Eventually, exhausted by caring for his mother and lacking funds, my ex-husband was abandoned by the mistress, who took their child with her. Wait. My wife has left me, my son is gone, you're all I have left. Don't leave me alone. But as she left, she dropped a bombshell. Just so you know, this child isn't yours. Whether it's true or not, who knows? It could have been a lie just to get away from my ex-husband. What's certain is that, aside from his mother, everyone had left him. My ex-husband, who complained about how hard it was to maintain two families, ended up losing both, just as the proverb says, he who chases two rabbits catches neither. My ex-husband is apparently struggling more and more each day with the care of his mother, whose dementia is worsening, causing issues at work. On top of an already difficult life, he's facing salary cuts and demotion. I informed my son, who's living in a dorm, about the divorce, my ex-husband's affair, and that his grandmother is now being cared for by my ex. I worried that my son might despise me. After all, I had abandoned the grandmother he loved and was causing his father suffering. But his response was unexpectedly kind. My son, not at all surprised, said this. "So, you finally got a divorce." "Finally? I kind of figured it would end up like this. You know, with all the exam stuff, I didn't realize Dad was having an affair, but hearing about it didn't really shock me. It's like, it wasn't surprising at all. He's been indifferent to our family for years." "Bob, Grandma was harassing you too, wasn't she?" "What? You knew, Bob?" "Yeah, we lived in the same house. Grandma might have thought she was hiding it, but it was obvious. I wanted you and Grandma to get along, so I tried talking to her a few times when you weren't around, trying to get her to stop. But it seems like it didn't work. I'm sorry I couldn't stop you from having a hard time." I was surprised. Bob knew all along. He had been paying more attention to us than I thought. Caught in the middle of the adults. It wasn't just me who was suffering. And I thought I had no allies, but that wasn't true. I couldn't rely on him because I was the parent, but my ally was closer than I thought. "I'm the one who should apologize. You tried to help, and I didn't notice. Don't worry about it. It's not your fault. Dad," he called me too, crying for help with caring for Grandma. "Seems like he's really struggling." Of course, I refused. "I've got my own life, and it's an important time for me. Sorry, but I think it's their own doing. That's how it was. You've always put Grandpa and me first, enduring everything. I've thought about it before, but Mom, you endure too much. You put yourself last too much. Now that you're finally divorced and free, live your life the way you want. I'll support you." "Thank you, Bob." Bob's warm words felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. Yes, from now on, I could live without having to tiptoe around anyone, using my strength for myself, doing what I love. The thought excited me. I am 46 years old. Life is still long ahead.
From the moment I met Jake, I knew our lives would be a roller coaster. I was always the type to plan everything out. By the time I turned 28, I had a stable job as a lawyer, a nice apartment, and a clear idea of where I wanted my life to go. Financial stability was important to me, and I prided myself on my ability to manage my finances. Jake, on the other hand, was a whirlwind. The first time we met, he had this infectious energy about him that drew me in. He was a tall man with messy brown hair and a carefree smile that could melt anyone's heart. We met at a mutual friend's party. I was discussing a recent case I had won at work, and Jake walked over, drink in hand. "So, you're the famous lawyer Rachel everyone's talking about," he said with a smirk. I raised an eyebrow. "And who might you be?" "The guy who's about to change your life." He winked. Laughing, I replied, "That's a bold statement, but sure, I'll bite. Tell me, how do you plan on doing that?" Over the next few hours, we talked about everything, from our childhood memories to our future dreams. He told me about his love for adventure and how he often went on spontaneous trips just because he felt like it. He said he believed in living in the moment and enjoying every second of life. I found his perspective refreshing. Here I was, someone who always planned ahead, and then there was Jake, someone who took each day as it came. Over the next few months, our relationship blossomed. He introduced me to a world of spontaneity, and I brought a bit of order to his chaos. Our dates were always full of surprises. One day, he would take me out for a fancy dinner, and the next, we would be on a random road trip to nowhere. It wasn't just the fun times that made me fall for him. It was also the way he cared for me. He would always make sure I was okay, and he had this unique ability to make me feel special. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find my apartment filled with candles and roses. Jake stood in the middle of the room, a huge grin on his face. "Thought you could use a little pick-me-up," he said. I smiled. "You always know how to make a bad day better." We settled into a routine, and before I knew it, we were talking about moving in together and even getting married. Our relationship had its challenges, especially when it came to our different views on money. I was always careful with my spending, while Jake was more impulsive. "Come on, let's just book that trip to Europe," he would often say. I would reply, "We need to plan it out, Jake. We can't just spend without thinking." He would just roll his eyes. "You worry too much." Despite our differences, we loved each other deeply. So, when he proposed, I said yes without hesitation. I believed that love could overcome any obstacle, and I was ready to start a new chapter of my life with Jake. Meeting the in-laws is always a nerve-wracking experience, but when Jake asked me to join a family dinner, I wasn't just nervous, I was curious. I had already heard snippets about Jake's family and their money habits, and I was eager to get the full picture. Their house was a large, sprawling mansion on the outskirts of the city. As we drove up the long driveway, I noticed the numerous cars parked outside, many of which looked brand new. As we entered, I was greeted with a loud cheer from Jake's relatives. They were a lively bunch, and the house was filled with laughter and chatter. Jake's mother, Linda, was a petite woman with a warm smile. She hugged me tightly and said, "It's so good to finally meet you." I smiled back. "Thank you for having me." Jake's father, Mark, was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a booming voice. "So, you're the lawyer who's captured our Jake's heart," he chuckled, shaking my hand firmly. "It seems that way," I laughed. Dinner was a grand affair. The table was laden with dishes, and wine glasses clinked cheerfully. As we ate, I observed the dynamics of Jake's family. They talked about their recent purchases and the vacations they had been on, or were planning to go on. Money seemed to flow freely in their conversations, and I got the sense that they didn't think twice before spending. Linda mentioned a recent shopping spree in Paris. Mark spoke of a new business venture that required a significant investment. Their younger daughter, Sarah, excitedly chatted about her plans to study abroad. At one point, Jake's older sister, Emily, turned to me. "So, how do you manage your finances? Being a lawyer, you must be earning a lot." I hesitated for a moment before answering. "I try to save and invest wisely. It's important to have a financial safety net." Jake jumped in. "She's the practical one in our relationship." Emily laughed. "Sounds like you two balance each other out." The evening went on, and I could feel the difference in our lifestyles. While I was always cautious about spending, Jake's family seemed to have a live for today mentality. It was clear that they enjoyed the finer things in life and didn't hesitate to indulge. As the night drew to a close, Linda pulled me aside. "You know, dear," she began, "Jake is lucky to have you. But do let him have his fun. Money is meant to be enjoyed." I nodded politely. "Of course. I just believe in being careful." She patted my hand. "Balance is key." As Jake and I drove back home, the weight of our differences hung in the air. I turned to him. "Your family is lovely, but we have very different views on money." Jake sighed. "I know. But love is about compromise, right?" I smiled. "Yes, but compromise doesn't mean losing oneself." Jake reached over and squeezed my hand. "We'll figure it out." But deep down, I couldn't shake off the feeling that our financial differences, combined with the influence of Jake's family, would soon lead to challenges that neither of us were prepared for. And so it happened. We were barely through the front door when the tension in Jake's family home became apparent. The large living room, which I remembered as a place of laughter and chatter during our last visit, was now filled with anxious faces. Everyone was there. Jake's parents, his siblings, and most notably, his younger brother Ryan. I had always found Ryan a bit unpredictable. He was the sort of person who took chances, always believing the next big break was just around the corner. That day, he looked restless, his eyes darting around the room, avoiding direct contact. Without much preamble, Linda, Jake's mother, began, "Thank you for coming on such short notice. We have a serious situation on our hands." Ryan, with a sigh, came forward. "I messed up. I owe the bank $100,000. They're saying they'll take legal action if I don't pay soon. The room erupted in a flurry of questions and exclaims. Jake's hand tightened around mine. He looked more shocked than anyone. Mark, Jake's father, rubbed his temples. Ryan, we always warned you about getting involved in those sketchy deals. Ryan snapped back. I thought they were good investments. Seeing where the discussion might be heading, Linda tried to refocus the group. The blame game won't help. We need to find a solution. Emily, Jake's sister, interjected. Why don't we all chip in? If we pool our resources, we might cover most of it. Mark sighed. Most of our money is tied up. We can't pull out that kind of cash right now. Then, all eyes turned to me. I felt trapped, like a deer in headlights. I sensed what was coming next. Jake, squeezing my hand tighter, spoke up. You've got savings, right? We can use that to help Ryan out. I looked at him in disbelief. Was he seriously suggesting this? Linda's eyes brightened. Oh, that would be wonderful. Can you help, dear? I tried to remain calm. Jake, we've talked about being careful with our finances. My savings are for our future. Jake's face reddened. This is family. Don't you care about my brother? Ryan nodded. Yeah, aren't we supposed to be family now? Or does money matter more to you? Feeling cornered, I replied, I understand this is a tough situation, but why should I hand over my hard-earned savings when there might be other solutions? Maybe I can help negotiate with the bank? Work out a plan? Jake's voice grew louder. This isn't the time for legal advice. Ryan needs help now. Linda chimed in, with an edge to her voice. We thought family meant something to you. Guess we were wrong. The room felt stifling, the weight of their expectations and accusations pressing down on me. I had hoped Jake would be my ally, but he seemed to have chosen his family's side. The meeting ended with no resolution. As Jake and I walked back to the car, I felt a chasm growing between us. The dawning light had always been a comforting sight, but this morning, its warmth was overshadowed by a chilling discovery. Glancing at my phone, I saw an alarming bank notification. My heart thudded heavily as I saw the staggering amount. $150,000 had been transferred out of my savings, and even more shockingly, it had been sent to Jake's account. Confusion and dread wrapped around me. This couldn't be right. Without hesitation, I tried calling Jake, but he didn't answer. I sent a message. Jake, why is there $150,000 transferred to your account? We need to talk, now. Time ticked by, and every silent moment only amplified my anxiety. He didn't respond. The swirling unease forced me into action, and I decided to confront him at his workplace. As I approached his office, I saw his empty desk. One of his colleagues, Sarah, looked up and said, Looking for Jake? He's taken the day off. Some personal matters, he mentioned. I muttered a thanks, my thoughts racing even faster now. With growing dread, I decided to go to his parents' place. Perhaps they knew something, or perhaps they could get Jake to talk to me. The large wooden door of their house looked more imposing than ever. I knocked assertively. After a brief moment, Linda, Jake's mother, opened the door just a crack. Her guarded expression told me she was aware of something. I need to speak to Jake, I demanded. Linda glanced behind her, hesitating. Jake isn't here, she replied. Where is he? He's taken a huge amount from our joint savings. I need answers. Her face remained passive. I don't know about any money, she claimed, but her eyes darted away. Let me in. We need to discuss this, I insisted. But instead of yielding, she firmly stated, I think it's best if you leave, and shut the door in my face. The blatant act left me stunned. Standing there, I realized the gravity of the betrayal. They knew, and they were covering for him. The reception area of the police station was bustling. Uniformed officers moved to and fro, the hum of conversation punctuated by the ring of phones. I approached the front desk, where an officer sat, looking engrossed in paperwork. Excuse me, I began, my voice slightly shaky. I need to report a significant unauthorized transaction from my bank account. It's my husband. The officer, whose name tag read Perez, looked up, her eyes filled with understanding. Take a seat. She gestured to the chairs nearby. I'll call someone to assist you. Sitting down, my thoughts swirled. Was I really about to report my own husband? Before I could contemplate further, a tall officer approached me. Mrs. Collins? He asked. I nodded. Yes, that's me. I'm Officer Daniels. Officer Perez informed me about your situation. Let's go to my office where we can talk. We walked down a corridor, and he gestured to a chair opposite his desk. As I explained the situation to him, I noticed his brows furrow in concern. So, you believe your husband took this money without your consent? I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Yes, and his family seems to be in on it. They shut me out when I went to confront them. Officer Daniels jotted down notes. Do you have any evidence of this transaction? I pulled out my phone and showed him the bank notification and the message I had sent Jake, as well as his vague reply. Officer Daniels looked at the screen, his expression serious. This certainly helps, but it's going to be a complicated case, given that he's your husband. Do you wish to press charges? Taking a deep breath, I responded, Yes, I do. I feel betrayed and violated. I need to stand up for myself. He nodded. I understand. We'll start the process. It may take time, but we'll support you every step of the way. Thank you, I whispered, tears threatening to spill. Officer Daniels extended a comforting hand. It's tough, I know, but you're doing the right thing. We'll get to the bottom of this. The courtroom was a daunting place, its high ceilings echoing the whispers of the people inside. Rows of wooden benches filled with friends, family, reporters, and strangers who had taken an interest in the case. The tension was palpable. I sat on one side, dressed conservatively, my best friend Sarah by my side for support. Across the room, Jake sat with his parents. He avoided making eye contact with me. The judge, a stern-looking woman with gray hair tied back neatly, cleared her throat, signaling the start of the proceedings. Order in the court, she declared. The prosecution began by detailing the charges against Jake: the unauthorized transaction, the evasion when confronted, and the role of Jake's family in possibly abetting the crime. It was painful to relive the betrayal as the evidence was presented. Bank statements, my call records, and the security footage from Jake's parents' home on the day I confronted them. Then it was Jake's turn to testify. He stood, looking much smaller than I remembered. Your Honor, I admit to transferring the money, but I did it out of desperation. My family was drowning in debt. I thought if I took the money, it would fix everything. I planned to return it. I clenched my fists. He was playing the victim card. The prosecutor spoke up. Mr. Collins, did you discuss this with your wife before taking such a drastic step? Jake hesitated. No, I thought she wouldn't understand. The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. So, you decided stealing was the better option? Jake lowered his gaze. I made a mistake. The trial went on for hours. Witnesses were called, statements were read. When the time came for me to testify, I felt a lump in my throat. With every ounce of strength, I recounted the events, the betrayal, the pain of being shut out by someone I had once loved. Sarah was called up next. She spoke of my character, my hard work, my dedication to building a life with Jake, and the anguish I had experienced when discovering the betrayal. When the closing statements were made, the room held its collective breath. The judge, after taking her time, declared, Mr. Collins, you've admitted to your crime, and while I understand your intent was not malicious, the act was a clear violation of trust. You will return the full amount of $150,000 to Mrs. Collins immediately and pay an additional fine for this unauthorized transaction. Jake's face went pale. His parents seemed equally shocked. Furthermore, the judge continued, I advise both parties to consider mediation to resolve any personal disputes. As I left the courtroom, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but at what cost? The man I had once dreamt of building a life with was now a stranger, a criminal in my eyes. After the court proceedings, my mind kept going back to one thing. How did Jake's family end up in such a mess in the first place? And why was I, a mere bystander in their family affairs, paying the price? My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to find out the root cause. The first person I thought to reach out to was Amanda, Jake's ex-girlfriend from before we met. She had once mentioned how Jake's family had a penchant for shady dealings. Back then, I had dismissed her words as jealousy, but now I wondered if there was some truth to it. I dialed her number, half expecting her not to pick up, but she did. Hello? Hey, Amanda, it's Rachel. I know it's been a while, but I wanted to talk. She paused, then replied, About Jake? Yes. We met up at a quiet coffee shop the next day. Amanda looked different, more mature and composed than I remembered. After exchanging pleasantries, I got straight to the point. Amanda, you once told me about Jake's family, about their dealings. I need to know more. She sighed, taking a sip of her coffee. I wondered when you'd ask. Jake's family has been involved in some sketchy businesses for years. Loan sharking, shady investments, you name it. They've always been about quick money. I frowned, but Jake never seemed that way. At least, not when we were dating. Amanda shook her head. He tried to distance himself from it, but family ties run deep. And when his brother got into that massive debt, he got sucked right back in. My heart sank. So, all this time? She nodded. He's been trying to bail them out. I warned you, remember? I saw the signs, the desperation, the sneaky phone calls, but you were too in love to see. I stared down, fighting back tears. I can't believe I was so naive. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. You're not the first and won't be the last. They're masters of manipulation. The conversation shifted, and I learned that Jake's brother had a gambling problem. The debts weren't from a failed business or medical emergency. They were from nights spent at underground gambling dens and high-stakes poker games. I thanked Amanda for her honesty and clarity. As I walked back to my car, everything made sense. The secrecy, the desperation, the betrayal. Jake's family was drowning, and in their desperation, they tried to drag me down with them. After the dust settled, one thing was clear to me. I needed to put the past firmly behind me. The first step was finalizing the divorce from Jake. It was a relatively quick process, given the circumstances. My lawyer, an old friend from law school, ensured that it went smoothly, without me having to face Jake again. One evening, after a long day at work, I met up with some college friends for dinner. Sarah, always the one with the latest gossip, leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You remember Jake's brother, right? Heard he's been locked up for fraud. I raised an eyebrow. You're kidding. She shook her head. Wish I was. Multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. They say he'd been scamming people for years. Anna chimed in. And that's not all. Jake's parents' property? Seized and auctioned off to clear their mounting debts. I took a deep breath, processing the information. It's just sad. That family had so many issues, so many problems. Sarah squeezed my hand. You dodged a bullet, girl, and look at you now, moving on, living your best life. I smiled, grateful for the support. Thanks, Sarah. It's been a journey, but I'm finding my way. Life continued. Days turned into weeks, and then months. The wounds of the past slowly began to heal, and I started building a life that was truly mine. One evening, as I was settling down with a book, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. I answered cautiously. Hello? Hey, it's Jake, came the hesitant voice. A chill ran down my spine. What do you want? He cleared his throat. Look, I know I've done wrong. I'm in a tough spot right now, financially. I was wondering if... No. I cut him off sharply. But I just need a little help to... No, Jake. You and your family have taken enough from me. I owe you nothing. I replied, my voice cold and firm. There was silence on the other end. Then, a soft, defeated, all right. I ended the call, feeling a mixture of anger and pity. But mostly, I felt relief. Relief that I had moved on, that I was no longer entangled in their web of deceit and drama. Over time, I immersed myself in work and spent quality time with friends and family who genuinely cared about me. I learned to value and trust myself more than ever, firmly believing that no matter what life threw my way, I would always come out stronger on the other side.